Now, let's talk about the bigger challenges that the US needs to face before they can even solve the problems we mentioned in part 1. But before we start, if you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe so you'll always be updated with videos like this. The outer walls Iran can disrupt any attempt by the US to invade Karg Island. They can launch bombardments, conduct raids, and attack in various ways against US troops as soon as they are positioned on the island. But those two layers of defense are what America will face only once they reach Karg Island. Because before that, there's an even bigger obstacle: the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's other nearby islands, and the country's mainland itself. Later, we'll discuss this in more detail. The composition of the US forces is quite extensive, but for now it's clear what they will bring to the fight. The US will deploy airborne assault units, paratroopers, as well as special operations forces and skilled helicopter pilots. But the main strength of their attack will come from 2 Marine expeditionary units, transported by amphibious assault ships to the region. When they arrive, they will likely conduct a beach landing. That is their training. That is what their ships are designed for, and that is the mission they are prepared to carry out. But before all of that can happen, they first need to reach Karg Island, and to do that, they have to get through the Strait of Hormuz. In the current situation, that means one thing: they have to fight to get through. If they can't do it, the Marine units won't reach the island, and the US will be forced to rely only on limited forces that can be airdropped, soldiers who are easy targets, lacking in numbers, and possibly put in serious danger, or even worse, low-flying helicopters that Iran can target. They can't do it. They won't be able to reach the ones that taking control of the Strait of Hormuz is a very difficult mission in itself. In fact, until now, the US has not even tried this, and instead, they criticize the Marine units, and because they also don't do this, the strait is only about 50 kilometers wide at its narrowest part. Exactly the units on the island, Iran's weapons from their mainland. It is also believed that Iran has already laid sea mines in the area, and it is likely that more will be added if the US attempts to control the route. They won't be able to reach the island, and they are capable of causing trouble for passing ships, and most of them are deployed very close to the strait itself, although it is not clear how many of these are still operational. Because of the Marine units on the island, the US would need more naval vessels than what they currently have deployed in the Gulf of Oman, including specialized minesweeping ships, which are currently lacking. And if the US really wants to control the strait, they would need to occupy some parts of Iran's coastline, which would require a large number of ground forces. And this is where another factor comes in. They are ready to join the fight, even if it won't be easy for them to reach Karg Island if they're in. And if the US really wants, they will be forced to focus their naval forces on controlling the strait just to enter the island. And they will have to forget about protecting the commercial ships leaving the Persian Gulf for now. According to experts, those crossings are very dangerous. So the US and its allies might need to assign a warship, or maybe even 2 for every tanker that will take that route. If they plan to do this in convoys just to move 10 tankers, they will need 12 warships. And in the current situation, that level of naval power is not yet in the region. But let's say the US decides to do this. They opened the Strait of Hormuz and maintained control over the Iranian coast long enough for their amphibious assault units to get through. And if we follow the best possible plan, they need to maintain control of the strait, because just taking it and letting it go again is pointless strategically. After that, US ships still need to get past other nearby islands in the Persian Gulf and avoid any possible hidden munitions there. Now, if the US wants to land their troops on Karg Island, and they feel safe from all the artillery, rockets, missiles, drones, and raiders we mentioned earlier, they can do that. But to do it quickly, they need to capture and hold more coastline. That means establishing a buffer zone on the nearest coastline of the island. And this is where the problem with the Iranian ground forces comes in again. Now, this is in an area that is economically critical and has complex infrastructure, where large Iranian forces are positioned, capable of moving and maneuvering quickly across the landscape. And whatever the U.S. chooses, whether to occupy the territory or not, they need to maintain operations in all the areas they control. If they agree to let go of the territory after occupying it, or decide not to occupy the entire area at all, that would show Iran that they can try to further expand their offensive. Because if the U.S. can't hold the Strait of Hormuz, the nearby islands, Karg Island, and the coasts near the Strait, Iran will see that maybe America can't reach that far, or maybe they don't even want to try. The attacking force. Maybe some of you are asking, why does it seem like we're underestimating the American military? Remember, while they may not have shown skill in nation building, America's forces are extremely skilled in offense. Their air power is the most expensive, the best in the world. Their naval power is the strongest in the world. And anyone who tries to face the Marines in an amphibious operation, it's clear they don't know who the Marines are. But the real limitation for the United States isn't their capability. The problem is the number of troops they have to carry this out. When it comes to military occupations, numbers matter a lot. And currently, the number of U.S. ground forces heading to the Middle East isn't enough to handle an operation like this. There are enough troops to occupy Karg Island, if the island existed in a perfect vacuum, with no other threats around. But that's not the reality. And for the U.S. to force its way through the Strait of Hormuz without actually securing it, then just take Karg Island while ignoring the threats in the surrounding region, that's extremely risky. As we've mentioned, the bulk of the U.S. force is contained in 2 Navy amphibious ready groups, each carrying a Marine expeditionary unit. These 2 ship groups carry no less than 3,000 Marines and possibly closer to 5,000, along with the thousands of Navy sailors who operate the ships. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Unit is likely already in the region by the time this episode is released. But if you can see them, it means they still haven't attacked. The 2nd group is expected to arrive around April 8, when the U.S. will have to decide whether to keep waiting or start opening the way to the Persian Gulf. The route also includes the 82nd Airborne Division, about 1,500 paratroopers, who have trained intensively for rapid deployments in limited territory, with the goal of capturing key control points, contested areas behind enemy lines. But the current members of the 82nd have never fought in a real parachute jump since 1989 during the invasion of Panama. They're good, but they're only light units. And the same goes for the Marines, which means they don't bring tanks or a lot of infantry fighting vehicles. According to some sources, the U.S. plans to deploy additional special operations units, including the Army Rangers, Naval Special Warfare Teams, and even Delta Force, the ultimate elite raiders who recently took Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro from his fortified bedroom. They might also send the Night Stalkers, highly skilled and specialized helicopter pilots for the riskiest insertion and extraction operations. But overall, even if we're being very optimistic about the number of troops to be sent, it's around 8,000 ground troops from different branches of the military, each one highly valuable, skilled, and a significant investment. It's not just money, but lives as well. And while 8,000 troops is not a small number, it's not enough to hold Karg Island, the nearby Iranian coast, or anything else that needs to be occupied, especially when it comes to maintaining control over the Strait of Hormuz. The 8,000 troops are more than enough to take the island itself. But if the island is just taken, the U.S. would be sending 8,000 very valuable soldiers to a very isolated and exposed piece of land. If these troops are sent to the coast of Iran for a mission that at first glance would strengthen security on Karg Island, the amount of coastline they would have to occupy and defend against thousands of Iranian ground troops who could appear and oppose them is just too great. And America also has no allies backing it. as NATO countries have clearly stated that they have no intention of putting their troops at risk for this war. The situation is the same with the countries in the Indo-Pacific. If the US can seize the Strait of Hormuz and hold it long enough for a NATO naval coalition to take over smoothly, then American troops might be able to move elsewhere. But right now, we're talking about a timeline that could take several weeks, if not months. Israel also doesn't have enough troops to help. The country is busy occupying southern Lebanon while maintaining control over Gaza, securing the West Bank, running the air campaign against Iran, and protecting other territories against emerging threats. Their military leaders admitted that they don't have extra troops to send to help the Marines on Karg Island. The Gulf states might be more willing, but in such a fast-moving, multidimensional environment, they won't be able to keep up. Aside from that, the Gulf states are also preoccupied with the inevitable large-scale retaliatory strikes from Iran, directly targeting their energy infrastructure, population, and possibly even their desalination plants. Even occupying Karg Island itself is not as easy as it sounds. There are still thousands of residents here, and while some of them are part of Iran's military, most are not. This means that if the US were to occupy Karg Island, they would also need to control the civilian population, which would require intensive round-the-clock guarding and monitoring by the troops stationed there. And with such a large population, there is a risk that Iranian fighters could slip into the internment camps that would be set up, requiring additional troops for security screenings, rapid response, and to replace those lost to ambushes or lone gunmen. And that's another problem that can only be solved by pulling troops from the already limited number of 8,000 on the ground, if we're being generous with the count. At the end of this section, it's important to mention that, according to the Wall Street Journal, Washington is planning to send an additional 10,000 ground troops to the Middle East to assist in seizing Karg Island, or in a similar operation. These troops may be equipped with heavy armored vehicles. Although this had not been confirmed at the time the episode was written, if the troops have already arrived by the time you watch the episode, you will see it on various news outlets. Even with the addition of 10,000 troops, there are two main concerns. The additional 10,000 may still not be enough if they need to seize, occupy, and defend hundreds of square kilometers of Iranian coastline between Karg Island and the Strait of Hormuz. The area that needs to be controlled is vast, especially with hundreds of thousands of Iranian foot soldiers continuously approaching their position. Given the size of the force and the limitations of America's aerial and sea transport capabilities, it would take several weeks before they could be deployed. For the troops to be prepared, deployed to the Middle East, and committed to the fighting. This is possible, and the additional 10,000 troops would help. But it's hard to determine how significant the impact would be. And there's a risk of overconfidence. As we wrap up today's episode, I hope the dilemma faced by the United States is clear to you. But we are not convinced that the most gung-ho leaders in U.S. politics really understand what they're getting into. In this White House, there's always some tough talk in every conversation. But even considering that, the U.S. leadership has consistently underestimated Iran's capabilities since before the conflict began. Worse, it seems like the U.S. doesn't learn from its mistakes. Yes, Trump tried to negotiate after Iran threatened to destroy the desalination plants in the Gulf states, but overall, it seems the administration believes they've already won. On the scoreboard, the U.S. and Israel might have a higher score than Iran, but this is war, not a game. For Iran, victory means survival. The scoreboard is meaningless as long as the Islamic Republic still stands, and it will remain even if it is completely destroyed. In our estimate, no country would truly choose to occupy Karg Island in a ground invasion in this situation if they understand that reality. However, according to the U.S. administration, it seems that Trump and his associates believe they can achieve their interests through a ground invasion of Karg Island. They believe that what they call the final blow to Iran will force the regime to negotiate on their terms. Israel is pressuring them to continue the fight as much as possible, and the Gulf states are pushing them to weaken Iran's capabilities significantly so that it will no longer be a threat. Despite public opinion and fears in the markets, it seems that Trump and his inner circle believe the problem will go away if they show enough strength and force to compel Iran to surrender. Their logic is based on a deep belief in America's military power and its strategic brilliance, which for them is more of a rightful expectation than an advantage that has long been maintained. But regardless of what Trump and his associates believe, the attack on Karg Island is being hindered by three main realities. Occupying Karg Island is not the same as controlling it as leverage against Iran. The U.S. does not have enough forces in the Middle East or on the way there to maintain that leverage. All necessary targets must be hit simultaneously. The U.S. cannot tolerate a high number of troop casualties in a war that is not supported by the majority of Americans. As of now, 13 U.S. service members have been killed, and this is a major problem for the public. Capturing Karg Island, along with other parts of the Iranian coastline using 8,000 troops, or even 18,000, would result in 10 times as many casualties if things go badly. The U.S. cannot endure a high number of troop casualties without the war becoming politically untenable. Iran knows this, and once Iran gets footage of fallen Marines and paratroopers on Iranian soil, it will spread it in every way possible to show the public the true cost of the war. No one in war intends to play fair. And when Iran plays dirty, that's what it will look like. They have to accept the high casualty rate. If the U.S. invasion of Karg Island is this lacking in planning and execution, the United States will walk into a trap where it can be bled dry and forced to surrender to Tehran. This may be harsh for some of our American viewers, but this is the truth. Warfare has changed, and Iran is far too skilled at this kind of warfare for anyone to expect the invasion of Karg Island to succeed, as Donald Trump does.